Welcome to the Emerging Biotech Leader, where we help biotech leaders maximize the value of their therapeutics from translational development to product launch. We're your hosts. I'm Kim Kushner.
And I'm Ramin Farhad. We are here to help you navigate the pitfalls of the biotech industry and illuminate the path forward.
Welcome to today's episode of the Emerging Biotech Leader. I'm so glad to welcome Matt Trudeau, the president of ITF Therapeutics. Today, we're going to have a great conversation about working in a family-run pharmaceutical company versus that of a public organization or a small venture-backed organization and the differences in running that kind of business. We're going to talk about development and commercialization in DMD or other areas of huge need in rare disease and what it means to commercialize in that space, as well as what it means to build an organization that's really focused on the late commercialization aspects of the industry versus the early research. So Matt, thank you so much for joining today. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Kim. Thank you.
Matt, to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about your background and really what got you to where you are today in this role at ITF?
Thanks for the question. I have an amazing privilege to be part of a team at ITF Therapeutics that's bringing innovative medicines to rare disease communities, specifically DMD. I grew up in the Kendall Square area, so I started out as a kid in a research lab and determined that really wasn't right for my wiring. And I was very lucky to have an opportunity to go over to Genzyme just after Genzyme had launched Cerezyme, its first recombinant protein therapy for Gaucher. So Genzyme was at its infancy, Kendall Square was at its infancy, the rare disease biotherapeutic companies were at their infancy. So I've been very lucky to have grown up in this part of the country, in this segment, this industry where we make an impact for communities at the same time creating value. My life has been sort of sheltered. The first almost 15 years of my industry life was at Genzyme, where I grew up through various sales and marketing roles, transitioning from a researcher into a commercial leader there. I spent about 6 years at Biogen, where I continued to have opportunity to bring innovation to different patient communities, and learned a different culture and learned a different commercial discipline than I had grown up with at Genzyme. Also great in different ways. I left Biogen after having made an impact there and had opportunity to be in a general management role, actually led the Asia Rim, not Japan or Australia, but the smaller Asian markets, where I got a broader appreciation for the business. Was also knee deep in the development of a number of Biogen assets in China. So again, learned different phases of the company and the importance of how teams work together to make a difference. I went from there to Bluebird Bio, where I was very lucky to be in the early commercial crew that was designing the go-to-market model for the industry's first gene therapy platform. And there, again, I learned a ton about how to scale a company. A lot of good things, a lot of mistakes we made as well that we learned from, that I carried forward from there. Since then, a couple small opportunities at small biotechs that unfortunately didn't pan out because the product didn't actually get through its phase 3 into a commercial asset. And here I am at ITF Therapeutics, where all that 25 plus years of experience has given me an opportunity to bring this asset that we're selling for, bringing forward the Duchenne community to the market.
Incredible. What a great background. And to your point, a great opportunity to build your career in the Boston area where you grew up, but also take your early scientific learnings and really turn it into that commercial background and role for the rare disease community.
There's a thread I'll just mention through that career as I look back on it and sort of maybe ask the questions of why did I follow certain pathways. If you asked me in my 20s would I be here, I probably wouldn't have guessed I'd be in this moment at this company, in this position. But I always followed the science, always followed impact. And through all of those companies I had a privilege of being at, we put the patient and the patient community at the center of our decision-making processes, of our mission. And I feel so lucky to be able to tell that story in hindsight, that I was at those kind of companies that made a seismic impact for the communities. that's what we're trying to do here as well.
Let's dig into that a little bit further, because in a lot of prior episodes, we've had leaders join that were really focused in rare disease, but focused in the very early drug development perspective. So they're thinking phase one, phase two, how to bring the patient voice into the development life cycle, how to make sure that they're designing endpoints that are, clinically meaningful, but also meaningful to the day-to-day quality of life. From your point of view, coming from much more of a commercially minded organization, and also just your personal background, how do you think about pulling in the patient voice and the patient perspective and putting the patient in the front of everything you do when you're already kind of late in the development life cycle? Things have already been kind of framed out, and you're really thinking about, how do I get this in the hands or gain access to the patients that are going to benefit most?
Yeah, the patient voice is no less critical at this phase. I would argue it's even more critical at this phase because it's not just about endpoints. It's about our service model. It's about how we think about making a number of decisions that impact the community and that govern our investments. We think about development actually beginning with an approval, and is a really important set of work, engagement with the agency. There's important work with the advocacy communities to design a clinical trial and design it in such a way that you have an optimal chance of getting an approval, of defining and meeting an endpoint in a clinical trial so you can pass the threshold to commercialize your product. And when you do that, there are 1,000 other questions that you need to answer about how does this product work in the real world? How does it work for different types of patients? How does it work in combination with other therapies potentially? And so we're very, at this company, and I think as an industry, need to be very focused on ongoing development once you pass the approval framework to bring the patient voice to the table, bring the payer's voice to the table, bring the physician's voice to the table, and continue to develop evidence that satisfies questions.
It's a really great point. A lot of organizations think that once they get approval, or that approval is the only milestone that they need to worry about in order to bring a drug to market. And I kind of see the approval from whatever agency you choose as like the baseline starting point, but it doesn't mean that physicians understand it and want to use it or believe in the same endpoints that the agency selected, or that patients are convinced. And I imagine, and I'd love your perspectives here, the rare disease community is has more scrutiny because they've either not had options for so long or been through so much trial and error to try to get something better for often the small children that they're trying to serve.
Yeah, for certain. I think rare disease communities in general are underserved, and for all the therapies that we're proud of having brought forward as an industry to rare disease communities, there are thousands that are unserved. And so as an industry, we need to keep focusing on that and keep bringing innovative science, phase one, phase two, but benchtop research as well, forward to bring more innovation forward to communities.
I'm interested in your perspective on when we're bringing drugs to the rare disease community. A lot of drug developers really think that we just need to get through agency muster and get approval. But to your point, there's so much other evidence that needs to be developed to convince the physicians, convince the payers, especially with a very high price tag, and ultimately convince the parents or the caregivers of these individuals that they should want to use these new medicines that are brought to market. So how do you think about that ongoing evidence-based and what you really need to do post-approval or leading up to an approval to really get successful access and uptick in this community?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Super important to think about the stakeholders beyond the FDA. And the FDA is a critical stakeholder. It's a critical partner in the process to bring medicines forward. And I won't speak about my current company, but in prior companies, I've lived through situations where the team is very, very excited to bring a product forward to a patient community, only to meet a payer that says, wait a second, you haven't actually validated these data. You haven't validated the use of the product in this subpopulation or in this subpopulation. So we're not going to create access for those patients. And so that's not, the payer is a partner in the ecosystem to bring therapies forward to patients. And it's our job as industry partners to generate the data to answer those questions. So I think it is a very important conversation for any company that's leaning into its phase three, is how does our study design meet the needs of the patients, of the physicians, and of the payers? And it may not be that your phase 3 design in and of itself meets those questions, but then what's the development plan? What's the life cycle plan for the asset? And what is the evidence you need around the asset to justify the access for given patient populations, and begin engaging the payer as you progress through phase 3 so that they're aware, they're conditioned, they're having their questions answered, and importantly, you understand their questions and the gaps that you have in your evidence platform, so you can continue to lean in and continue to generate data to support and answer those questions. Our job at the end of the day is to bring medicines forward that make an impact for rare disease communities and create access for them. All right, and creating access means we put the best data we have forward and we continue generating evidence to answer questions.
Absolutely. And Matt, it seems like you're in a really unique position right now. So in your prior organizations, I'm sure there's, formal business casing on how you decide to invest in what's one study versus another, and all this additional lifecycle management and evidence in order to bring things forward, which, especially for very small first asset companies, it's really hard to kind of vie for the budget to do those right things. It sounds like you're in a very unique situation at this point at ITF, being more of a family run organization, which holds a completely different kind of set of rules, if you will, for how you govern and manage. Can you tell us a little bit about how ITF is so different in that way? And as a leader, how it changes your decision making and your calculus on how you're running the business?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Maybe I'll start with what's the same rather than what's different. And, what is the same is we expect ourselves and we're expected to put forward robust business cases, that we justify our investments, that we are goals and impact oriented. That's no difference between a public company, I think, and a private organization. Maybe what's different in a private organization, whether it's family run or not, I think we're in a very privileged position that we belong to Etal Pharmaco. We're the U.S. affiliate of Etal Pharmaco, which is a family business, a private organization. The benefits are that when we make decisions, we don't focus on quarterly earnings. We focus on impact. We focus on the long term, and we invest for optimizing the impact, optimizing the value creation. We don't communicate in the same way that a public company reports earnings, reports patient numbers, etc. But we focus internally and externally on the impact we make and how we invest. Etal Pharmaco specifically is we're in a privileged place, as you said, Kim, because the company is in a very strong position. There's no debt on its balance sheet. And we made the business case as to what we needed to optimize the impact for the Duchenne community and get this product to patients. And they invested based upon what we said we needed. And along the way, as we've learned, we've listened to the community, patient community, physician community, and we've made changes to our service model, to our evidence generation platform, etc. The benefits we've experienced is we can move very quickly. We make a good case, we move very quickly, and the conversation is not about the quarterly earnings. It's about impact. It's about long-term investment and partnership with the communities we serve. So it's a little bit different in that respect. But at the end of the day, the expectations are the same. They're high. They're focused on the patient impact, the patient community, just like other companies I've been at.
Yeah. And how do you balance the relationship between the US entity that you just described and the kind of European headquarters, if you will, at Etal Pharmaco, and some of the competing or potentially competing priorities and areas of focus for the organization?
It's a really good question. The organization Etal Pharmaco has made a very focused and intentional investment in rare disease, including the founding of ITF Therapeutics in the U.S. in January of 24. So we're only 18 months old, and we've run very, very fast for 18 months to get to a very a solid foundation that's driving impact. There is a criticality when bringing an innovative medicine to market, particularly in rare disease, that we're very thoughtful that it is a very small global community. And the way we talk about our offering, our data, the safety of our product in the US shouldn't be any different than the way we talk about it in Germany, because it's the same disease, it's the same product. There are different rules and regulations that maybe govern how we can engage and how we can educate patients differently in the US than in some European markets. But at the end of the day, the core, the evidence generation plan requires global governance. The great thing I think about ETAL Pharmaco that we've experienced is um, we put decision making as close to the customer as possible. The customer is the patient, customers are the physicians and the payers. And so the US organization is a significant contributor to the overall impact we're making globally for a whole number of reasons. We have a larger population, we have faster
Right.
access, um, we create value in a different way. And so for those reasons, in most companies, the U.S. has a very significant seat at the table when we think about how do we develop the evidence? What are the questions we're answering of the market? In many cases, NHS in England's asking the same questions as a payer in the US. They just ask in a different way. They need their answers formatted in a different way. Um, but we're growing as an organization in the US, and we're growing as a rare disease organization within ETAL Pharmaco. We're very privileged to have received approval from MHRA for our product. We've received conditional approval from the EMA, and we're supporting access in European markets. We are creating impact in European markets, and we launched earlier in the U.S. The FDA allowed us to move faster than the European authorities, so we've learned a ton. And those learnings about how patients experience Duvyzat, what they need for their onboarding phase, etc. We transferred those learnings to Europe, and so they can take advantage of those lessons and move faster um, to to support their communities. And just as we have moved fast to make changes along the way from those learnings
Right.
and listening activities.
Yeah, so you had to learn and adapt and then figure out what makes sense to translate internationally, what doesn't, and really partner, it sounds like, with the other entities in Europe and elsewhere to bring this drug to market.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing, it always is smoother when we talk about
Of
the
course.
process than the actual, the meat and potatoes every day of getting through it. At the end of the day, um, it's a lot about the people. It's a lot about attitude. We do spend time talking about roles and responsibilities and decision making to get clarity and to try to mitigate churn. But we're super lucky to be part of an organization that's all focused on doing right for the community we serve, bringing innovation forward. It has a wherewithal to support us as we got up and running and built an organization in 2024 to make the impact we're making now.
It's incredible, especially how much you've been able to accomplish in such a relatively short period of time. And along those lines, um, your first asset, I would say first, hopefully there's many more, is focused on DMD. There is a huge surge in at least research in the DMD community today. I'm not sure if you would even consider these other organizations competition, or how you even think about the marketplace, but can you give us some thoughts about what does it mean to be commercializing a drug in a space that is demi-competitive, if you will? And it's an interesting balance to even call it competitive when we're also saying that there's still this huge need in the DMD community, that these patients really deserve really great options. And options is the right way to think about it, because everyone's a little bit different, and there's so many different um, ways to think about the development of the disease. But how do you think about commercializing a drug in this space when there are so many people trying to develop in it and try to create the next best thing and competing against gene therapy or otherwise?
Yeah, I'll pick up on the last point you made, which is, my gosh, there are a lot of patients in this community that are underserved. There are about 12,000 DMD patients in the US, give or take, of which about 10,000 could be served by our product. There are the majority of those patients. I mean, I'm very proud of the team. We're very proud of having made an impact and gotten to momentum in the marketplace, in the community. but we have so much more work to do. There are thousands of patients that aren't on any drug other than steroids. And so solving those problems, whether it's education, access problems, um, convenience, there are a whole host of things that maybe keep patients away from getting access to drugs. So that's the job. And I think our competition is maybe complacency. Um, and in regards to competition for other innovators in the space, that is a great thing. And this is a community, like any rare disease community, like any patient community, which benefits from more options. So I reflect with some leaders in the patient advocacy organization in Duchenne, and they reflect 15 years ago, there was nothing. In this space, there was a hope and a promise. Um, Looking back on that now, there's so much more work to do. There's so much more value to bring forward. There's so much more that can be done and will be done for Duchenne as some of these things in the pipeline continue to advance, hopefully through the clinic and into commercial setting. But that's a great thing, and we welcome, we cheer on all innovation coming into this community and into rare diseases in general. And when a product doesn't make it through phase 3, we don't celebrate that. That's a tragedy and a setback for the community. So that's our view of the world, and I think that's what powers us and puts us in good position to look at the next asset and look at the next asset. Of course, we compete for share of voice. Of course, we compete for how somebody thinks about our product versus that product. But at the end of the day, it's about getting our product to patients and solving their problems to do that.
Absolutely. I always reflect on this idea that if you always give the right product to the right patient at the right time, you're not really competing. You're just making sure that they're getting their hands on what's going to be best for them. And every patient is a little bit different, and one might benefit more on your drug versus another. And so kind of that rising tides mentality absolutely kind of supports the entire community.
Yeah, the way we look at it, if a decision is made by a patient, a parent, a physician that our product's not right for them, and that decision is informed, that's a good decision.
Right.
The tragedy for us is when that decision is made and it's not informed by a deep understanding of the mechanism of the disease, about how the product may play a role, about the data, about the safety profile, about how to access it, fear that I'm not even going to pursue this because I can't get reimbursed
Right.
for it. That's the tragedy, is that a decision is made that's not completely informed by the facts.
Absolutely. And one thing, Matt, that you and I have discussed prior to this episode is the fact that, Duchenne is really the starting point for ITF as an organization, at least in the US, and that hopefully it's an ongoing rare disease platform that you're able to commercialize, drugs to support many communities. As you think about that vision, what are the things that not just ITF, but other organizations can learn from broadly the Duchenne story and what's really brought it to the forefront, what's really been able to bring options? To your point, 10 years ago, there was virtually nothing. And now we are seeing innovation, we are seeing optionality come forward, and we're getting to solutions, but there's hundreds of other rare diseases that deserve the same. So, what can we learn about that?
Quite a bit. I think the pace of innovation is accelerating with the integration of AI and big data with a deeper understanding of various diseases. I think where we have a much deeper understanding of the muscle regeneration pathway of um, the fibrotic elements that play a role in the progression of DMD. And I think you see this across other spaces as well, where more science is bringing forward more opportunities for patients. Um, I'll reflect a little bit on how we started here at ITF, and we're very lucky to be guests in the DMD community and to serve the community with a product that works, that was shown in its clinical trial to make an impact at its primary endpoint um, for a community that's desperately needing more innovation and continues to need more innovation. Um, So I wouldn't recommend this to anybody. But we started in January of 24, and we were looking at a PDUFA date at the end of March of 24. And so it has been a sprint, and we continue to run fast. The lessons for us and what I'm proud of, and also some things we learned along the way, is we started by engaging and listening to the community. It's the first thing we did. Um, our first hire, our first person we brought on board was patient advocacy lead. We began engaging the community right away and listening and learning and getting advice on how we should show up. Secondary to that, we began very quickly setting up the operational backbone, um, the critical requirements to get product to patients. We needed licenses, we needed a supply chain, we needed a quality system, we needed regulatory processes. That's what we focused on because with all that stuff, we couldn't serve anybody. So I'm so thrilled to share with you that we activated our supply chain. We got all of the block and tackle things in order to supply product by the end of July of 24. So it took us about 6.5 months to establish a company, to run quickly, and begin making an impact. And now we're just over a year on. We're celebrating having impacted well over 1,000 patients in the community in the U.S. with commercial supply. And we're optimistic that we can continue to make that impact, and we're seeing momentum in the market that's also supported by evidence that we're continuing to generate and experiences that are being shared across the patient community as well as the physician community. Um, so kind of I look back on that thinking about that as maybe chapter one of ITF Therapeutics, which is to say what a privilege we've had to bring an important product, a meaningful product forward to a community in need. Chapter three is, as you said, Kim, we will be a larger, more complex, more robust organization that makes a bigger impact for rare disease communities. That's our objective. That's where we are going. The question is, how fast do we get there and how do we build our systems to support it? Right now, we still have a lot of work to do for DMD. We have a ton of work to do to optimize the impact in this community and do right by all of the constituents we serve, including my shareholder, the owner of the company. Um, but this chapter two moment we're in is making sure our processes, our systems, our structures are supporting the growth trajectory. We are involved in planning for the next assets. And Etal Pharmaco itself has a robust science organization, and Javinostat has opportunity to impact a number of different disease profiles and disease states. We're optimistic we'll be able to bring Javinostat more broadly to other disease communities. That's all product that's in the pipeline. We're optimistic. We're also being thoughtful that until we hit the starting line, which is the approval, that we need to be ready to optimize the impact, and we need to begin engaging the market, educating payers, learning from the patient community and the physician community over the coming years. We're also actively engaged in business development discussions with like companies that are focused in rare disease, that are very passionate about the work they do, and whether it's a U.S. company that's looking at the current financial markets and thinking maybe we don't want to build a commercial organization right now. It's expensive. It is a set of unique expertise that are required to have in place and operational to optimize impact. So we offer that to companies, and there are also companies from outside the U.S. that have developed really important innovations for rare disease communities and are looking for a partner. So these are all possibilities and potentials, but that's our vision. That's where we're heading, and we're taking action on this sort of chapter two right now of our 3-chapter book to get ready for the 3rd chapter.
I really like that. Not just the chapter analogy, but to your point on being at the starting line when you get the approval or when you hit that PDUFA date. And I almost see the evolution of the industry and the rare disease community as a relay race where you have these incredible innovators, but there's multiple starting lines, and we can't think of any one of them as necessarily a completion or a finish, but it might be a really elegant handoff to really be able to ensure that patients get access, that the community gets the options that they deserve, and that we're really holistically bringing new medicines to market in a space where, to your earlier point, which I greatly appreciate, there is more innovation now than there ever has been. And I think there's so much promise of what the next couple of years between AI and other investments are really driving. There's a huge opportunity. We just need to take advantage and really create the operational infrastructure to allow for those handoffs in the community.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the operational discipline and structure required to commercialize a product is not insignificant. Just like developing, a product through the clinic
Exactly.
from phase 1 through phase 3 is significant. It's a unique set of expertise, and the culture of a rare disease company needs to reflect that it looks like this in terms of development to commercialization. And this company, Tal Pharmaco, has an amazing team of scientists, principally stationed in Milan, which is where the company lives. It's headquartered. And we work hand in hand when we think about how do we answer ongoing questions the community has, and with the community constituents being payers, physicians, and most importantly, the patient community.
Amazing. Matt, this has been a really great conversation. There is so much to learn from the ITF journey with the DMD community and all of the work that you've done in the rare disease space. So thank you so much for joining us and for all of the great insights today.
Thanks for tuning in to the Emerging Biotech Leader, an SSI strategy podcast. Join us each month for more conversations with biotech leaders. If you'd like to help navigating the complexities of biotech, reach out to our team at ssistrategy.com. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review.